Today's episode of Wine Time Fridays is brought to you in part by our friends at J. Bookwalter Wines and Naked Wines.
It's been a long week, right? Are you ready to wind down? Why not? It's time for the Wine Time Fridays podcast with Shelley and Phil. Neither are sommeliers, but both have a deep passion for life, each other, and of course, delicious wine. And now, here to talk about this week over a glass of wine is Shelley and Phil. It's wine time.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Wine Time Fridays with Shelley and Phil on this Friday, March 28th, episode 258. Shelley, happy Friday. It's wine time. And I just want to be the first to say welcome back, Shelley. Shelley didn't make last week for a number of reasons, but she's back and she's orange and we're right now in San Diego for Social Media Marketing World. Probably shouldn't tell the whole world about that.
Probably not.
That's okay. We have a house sitter here, so don't even screw with Serena. Today we have a guest to wrap up the last week of the first Washington Wine Month. We have Victor Palencia from Palencia Wines. Is it Palencia Vineyards? Palencia Wines?
Palencia Wine Company.
Palencia Wine Company. Victor, welcome to Wine Time Fridays, where we don't get anything straight until we're well into the podcast.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Shelley. Appreciate the warm welcome. Excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
This is fun. So we kind of like to start with something in our glass. And given the fact that I think we're going to taste through 7 different wines, and 2 or 3 of them are really special to the point where you may have to go to the winery to taste these. They may not be available in North Idaho. The others are. So without further ado, and before we get into Victor's story and everything, I think we're going to have a toast with a sparkler. And this is a sparkler of Albariño. By the way, I think Albariño Day is not too far away.
It's a double sparkler.
It's a double sparkler, yes. Albariño tends to be a little effervescent. Victor, can you tell us a little bit about this sparkling Albariño while I open it?
Absolutely. So we started making Albariño right at the inception of Palencia Winery, Palencia Wine Company. Our first vintage of Albariño was actually in 2012. And we were very fortunate that we were working with a great site. And Albariño does really well with high acidity, cooler climate style wines. Naturally, this specific wine itself was born with the idea of harnessing some of the aromatics Albariño carries. I love the citrusy mineral characters with Albariño and the food friendliness. Of course, it's a naturally lower alcohol wine if it's made in the style. So adding the bubbles was just a natural fit, and it's been a great hit. It's just been a good transition for the variety.
Can I just say that when I was pouring this, before I even put my nose into this, I got that citrus.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little like a lemon lime sort of thing almost.
Yeah, that lemon rind kind of yeah. So this Albariños are very they can be very aromatic, especially when they're produced in these cooler climates and fermented in the style. With those aromatics, the carbonation obviously adds a lot of the volatility and brings out some of those aromas. The unique part about this Albariño is this is made in a lightly modified Charmant method, meaning it didn't really go through secondary fermentation. And so it's going to retain some of the natural aromas that you get from primary fermentation, the citrus, the fruits, the stone fruits. So it in itself is kind of a unique style of producing bubbles.
Well, we're going to do a proper Wine Time Fridays toast. Health, wealth, and abundance, gratitude, romance, and Shelley.
Salute.
Salute.
Delicious.
This is really really interesting. I'm not sure if I've ever had a sparkling Albariño. Yeah, this is really good. Victor, you could get into real trouble with this on it's 12%. I mean, this would go very fast on the deck. This last day this week, we had temperatures in the low 70s for the first time in 2025, and this would be great on days like that. Yeah, this is fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the fruit forwardness, of course, and with this specific vintage, we were dealing with a little bit warmer climates, but even in itself, it did retain some great acidity, and the bubbles are not as abrasive. Sometimes carbonated or can be really astringent, really bitter on the back end. These bubbles, the actual essence on the palate is very smooth, very full body. So you do get hints of complexity in there in the mid palate, but it's a very refreshing, easy drinking wine. We find that it drinks very easily. Those bottles are not big enough is the only complaint I have right now.
Shelley, do you have a question? Yes, you do. Why would you do that to me? You're so proud of yourself, too.
Are you originally from Washington? What's my question?
Oh, so I was raised in Prosser, but born in Michoacan, Mexico.
Born in Mexico?
So I am a first generation migrant from Mexico. Yeah, Mexico. Michoacan, Mexico.
Got it.
Yeah, so Michoacan State, and of course, yeah.
When did you move to the States?
Well, I was very, very young. This would have been in the late 80s, actually. And just my father was part of the early migrants and just basically found seasonal work, not seasonal, but full-time year-round work in this area, just a rich agricultural area in the Yakima Valley, and made the brave decision to move the whole family up here. So.
Wow. And at that time, probably not, you said late 80s. That's right when Washington wines are starting to come to their own a little bit. My guess is was he working in the vineyards or was he working in orchards?
Well, that's a very it's a great question. You're right. There wasn't a lot of wineries in those times. That was probably the early, I guess the early seedlings of what the industry is today. So I'm going to step back just a little bit to kind of just share the full story of my father and our family. So if you see our label, there's a gentleman holding a shovel on front of the label. So that is a tribute to my father. So
that's so cool.
And so growing up in the Yakima Valley, there was a lot of perennial crop in those days. There wasn't actually a lot of orchards or vineyards or any really substantial permanent crop other than maybe some hops in here and there. A lot of it was mint, corn, just perennial row real irrigation, they used to call it. So so my father, for the first, as long as I can remember, as growing up as a kid, of course, he was an irrigator and always had a shovel with him. And for anybody who's been in the farm world, when you did real irrigation, you basically are watering these little trenches, and you have to hop this siphoned hose line from trench to trench every other day to alternate which row crop you're gonna water that day. Wow. So you could walk miles of these just amazing fields, mint fields, corn fields, just as far as you could see, just gorgeous. And so I loved it as a kid. I mean, I'm running around hopping. I mean, totally underappreciating the scenery because behind us you could see Mount Adams, you could see the peak of Mount Rainier. And when they would harvest these mint fields, you could smell them for miles and miles and miles away. I mean, just a beautiful, beautiful season. So that's where that was kind of the heartland of why my father brought us to this area. Is there's full-time work year round. As the seasons progressed and the vineyard world or the wine industry began to grow, all that seasonal crop land slowly began turning into vineyards. We just happened to have landed in the perfect spot where we were in prime vineyard growth area. It was a high elevation of North Prosser. And in those days, Prosser was becoming it was recognized as the heartland of wine country for Washington State because we had the highest concentration of wineries. And at that time, it might have been maybe 15 wineries. I mean, it wasn't very many wineries, but it was a lot in comparison, to those days. And it got to a point where our home, the little farmland or farmhouse that we were living in, was completely surrounded by vineyards. So I got the chance to witness that transformation from these perennial crops to, orchards to hops to eventually everything becoming vineyards. And so that was my upbringing. That's really what anchored me into the wine industry and gave me a foundation to be able to grow from.
Last Friday, Victor was at Lake City Center along with our friend Lisa, who in about 3 days is on her way to Paris and Burgundy. She won it. So good for you, Lisa. Enjoy your trip. But so we first tasted these wines from Pilgrim's Market, and I fell in love with the wines. I saw Victor was going to be doing the wine dinner for the North Idaho Entomological Society at Lake City Center. And I'm like, we really need to get Victor on. And I'm so glad it worked out. And I think at this point, we'll probably open that rosé. And Victor, you're going to talk a little bit about why you like your sparklers in flutes. We're having these flutes.
Yes.
And so our friend Martino will be very pleased to see that.
Well, yes, I definitely prefer them in the flutes. When you pour bubbles like this in flutes, you allow you allow the carbonation to better form, and then you get a little bit more integration by not over volatilizing the wine. Sparkling wine, you don't want to be able to swirl. You don't want to have a big open style dome glass like you would with reds. You want to trap all those aromas. So as you're sipping those, you basically get that full impact in your palate.
This
is so pretty.
I don't know if you heard Shelley. She's like, this is very pretty. Look at that.
Thank you.
Wow.
I'll talk a little bit about the color. So I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. So this wine is sparkling Counoise. And since I can remember, I've always been the type of person that likes to think outside the box, try new things, really explore and kind of break the norms. And I've done that with just about everything in our lineup. This is why we have such unique varietals, a new style. This is actually from our estate. This is our very first release from our new estate. Now, the reason that's so, I guess at least for us, such a big deal is we bought this estate just a year ago. So we actually moved into this new property actually a little over a year ago now. In fact, we moved last year in February. And so within a year's work, I was able to come in, prune, grow the grapes, readjust the vineyard, and have a bottled product before the end of the year. We bottled this in December last year. And
that's amazing.
And we were really fortunate because, go ahead, Phil. Yeah.
Well, I have a couple questions. One is, is this going to be exclusive for making sparklers? Or are you going to make some still wine with these grapes too?
No, the Counoise is the sparkling. Yeah. And the reason why is as I got a chance to see the property, look at its strengths, its weaknesses. This is the vineyard language I like to tell people that I speak. I grew up around vineyards. I can, with walking a vineyard, I can see things, subtle nuances, whether they're stress points, canopies. I mean, there's subtleties that you can capture that'll basically, I call it vineyard language, but it basically translates back to what kind of qualities, what kind of characters, what kind of components are going to be offered to the wine product. And with Counoise, if you're familiar with the variety, Counoise is a very big, cluster, juicy varietal. It can be very vigorous. It can actually grow very substantial grapes.
This is very.
Thank you. You can control
Yes.
Yeah, so you can control the fruit and the weight of Counoise by berry size, but it's very hard to do without really affecting the style. So instead of trying to fight the region that we're in, we're right next door to Red Mountain, I wanted to use that advantage and encourage big berries, encourage big clusters, because what that does is actually produce more pulp and more of these volatile terpenes, which is what you get aroma from. It also produces a little bit different color component, as you're seeing in the wine, just a gorgeous light, almost magenta color. That is a reaction of both managing the chemistries at the point of harvest and also, of course, the skin contact. So,
there's a real skill to be able to walk a vineyard and come up with an immediate, probably not 100% accurate, but if you're 90 or 95%, to be able to do that on the spot. And that comes from hopping the vineyards when you're a kid, right? Because that's your schooling, and you didn't even know school as a kid, and yet you were being schooled and didn't even know it.
Yeah, right. And I guess it's one thing to walk a vineyard out of pure enjoyment, but when you're grilling 10 hours a day at 90 to 100 degree weather, whether you like it or not, you're noticing nuances every time you walk up these, because vineyards aren't planted in the best of grounds, and I'm sure you're aware of that. Vineyards are typically planted in a slope, rocky soils, sandy loam soils. So it's not a walk in the park. It's they're definitely.
You haven't got your flip flops like me.
Yeah, probably not wearing flip flops to work. Yep.
No. So this the Albariño sparkler seemed pretty dry. This seems like it's got a little bit more residual sugar in it. Am I even close to being right on that?
Surprisingly, the chemistries, so the sugar, pH, TA, are very similar. What you're getting actually more in this wine is it is a lot fruitier. There's a lot more fruit component because it's from a warmer site, and so that's one of the things. Now having one vintage under my belt with this site, now that I understand some of that fruit component, I'm going to definitely make a minor adjustment to go even drier next year. And adjust for that. Now, it's a very fine line though. Like you're talking, a very single digits, where if you miss that profile, you end up now with a thinner, leaner, maybe not as complex wine that can have that bitterness in the finish. So, so it's a very, very touchy subject. It's probably the key most critical time for me at the point of fermentation is monitoring these chemistries and tasting aggressively. It's a hard job, but someone's got to do it.
Exactly. Are these both picked at the same time, the Albariño and the Counoise?
You said are they picked?
Are they picked at the same time relatively?
No. So the Counoise is harvested roughly about 30 days earlier, if you can imagine that.
Oh, wow.
Earlier. Wow.
So if you got to remember, the Counoise is our estate, which we're right basic at the base of Red Mountain. The Albariño is a touch of Yakima Valley fruit, and in this particular vintage did have a little bit of the Ancient Lakes fruit. A lot vast, cooler climates, not as hot as this region, so you have a little bit more a longer hang time, giving the fruit a little more time to adjust and produce flavors.
These are great. These are freaking awesome.
Thank you.
So you just released this sparkling Counoise. Boom.
Yes.
Just released that. Is it in your tasting room as we speak?
It is. We'll be sold out in a couple weeks. We released it in December. We're probably down to maybe less than 20 cases now, and we have our wine club coming up, so I'm sure it's probably sold out now. So it was a very well received wine. Yeah.
How many cases did you make of this? I mean, imagine.
It was a very small batch.
Right.
About 150 cases, so very small batch.
Good for you. That's not a small amount. first run. Yeah. So we have the 2024 Palencia Sparkling Albariño and the 2024 Palencia Sparkling Counoise. Probably both are. Is the Albariño available?
Yes, yeah, Albariño is available still, but not, it's not far behind from being sold out as well. But yeah, they're both.
Okay.
We typically, these are early release varietals. We try to get them early on in time for the holidays to give people something to celebrate with the new year. So a lot of that goes out during the holidays, and then we have a little bit of remnants that we sell through the rest of the year. So.
These are really great Easter brunch.
Oh.
Thank you.
Yeah. So go down to Yakima, Kennewick area, a Little Red Mountain, and go and grab a bottle or two of these before it's too late, and then bring them back. It'll be the end of your Easter brunch and your Mother's Day brunch. We're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna stick with white and rosé as we move towards a little bit more color in our glass. Welcome back to Wine Time Fridays with Shelley and Phil. Victor Palencia from Palencia Wine Company. Shelley's over here acting like she's in the laboratory. I guess we are going to use the one white wine glass. Do you require a rinse point on that? Are you sure? Okay. We just had two sparklers. And now we are moving on to some still wines. This is a 2024 Palencia Albariño. Again, with Victor's father symbolically on the label with a shovel in his hand. And I love that. I just love the homage to pay respects to where we came from, It's
Thank
the
you,
best.
Bill. Thank you.
We're just going to do hashtag cheersing on this.
Cheers.
Big fans of Albariño in this house. And so would you decide to produce the Albariño because it was basically there on the acreage you bought? Or is it something that you have loved and said, this is a really great AVA for this varietal and I want to produce it?
Oh, sure. No. Yeah, no, great question, Phil. So the Albariño, actually the property that we bought does not have Albariño in it, but we did start producing it back in 2012. Our first official vintage for Palencia Wine Company was in 2010. And when we launched the company, I had already been making wine for numerous wineries for a number of years. In fact, at the time I was the director of winemaking for a fairly large custom crush winery, and a very large program that I was managing. So I was very familiar with wine business management and the wine business world and what it took to really launch a wine brand, because that's really what we were doing.
Right.
So when I launched Palencia Wine Company, we started out of Walla Walla in an incubator program from the port from the airport. Port of Walla Walla has this cute little program. Yep, at the airport.
Yes.
And for those who are not familiar, the incubator program basically gives you a very competitive lease program on these like ready to build or basically plug and play micro winery setups. You have your drains, you have your cooling systems, you have a little tasting room area, and of course you're clustered in with a few other startups wineries that it gives you opportunity to really just flourish. And so for us, we jumped on that opportunity. And I remember when I applied for the program, I went and met with the port before my trip. I was actually headed out on a trip to France that year. And before my trip, I went to go see the port. We visited, we talked. They gave me a draft lease. I'm like, okay, I got to take this trip. I went to France. Well, on the airplane ride back, I could not wait to get off the airplane and sign that lease. Like I was ready. I was so inspired by some of the culture over there, the simplicity, and just the way of life with wine.
The way of life with wine. Exactly. That's exactly what that is.
And I saw myself in that, immersed in that. And I will say it's a scary moment because I don't come from a family background of entrepreneurs. I don't come from cultural entrepreneurs. And being a Latino in the wine market, to be honest, was a little bit scary because there wasn't very many. I can't think of any other person in Walla Walla, that's for sure. But I'm like, I'm going to do this. I love it. I've always gone outside the box. I've always done different things and embraced the challenge. Now, fast forward, the reason I chose Walla Walla is I love the culture, the wine scene, just the wine language, everything that Walla Walla put together was just beautiful. And so after going through the wine program, just fell in love with the community. I saw myself there. And so when I set my mind on launching Palencia, I didn't want to do what everybody else in Walla Walla was doing at the time, was just making strictly red wines. The traditional Cab, the Syrahs, the Merlots, and maybe like a rosé. And I'm like, no. So my wine program initially was 60% whites and 40% reds. And that was my model because white I could release within 3 to 4 months, which immediately gave me cash flow to function as a business. And then eventually, as the years transitioned, I moved it to 60% reds, 40% whites. Now, within those transitions is when Albariño came into play because I didn't want to make just the regular whites. I actually brought in Pinot Gris. I did a Pinot Noir Rosé, and Albariño was part of that. So I've always been wanting to do things that are new and refreshing with some of these, especially with the Northwest cuisine that we have such a beautiful flair of fusion flavors.
Right.
And so Albariño became our anchor white wine over the years to the point now we're probably peaked out at about 1,500 cases a year now on average.
When did you leave the incubator program?
So we graduated. We flew away. We eventually in 2007, I believe. No, 2017, I believe.
Okay. And were you there when Contos was there?
Yes.
Okay. But you were there before Eternal Wine and Drink Washington State was there, right?
That is correct. I believe I was on my last year when Eternal came in there.
Gotcha. And of course, Brad just flew the coop.
Yes, he did.
This January.
Yes, I heard. How exciting.
We've talked about this before. I really want to touch on it again because Shelley and I are huge fans of that program. It's the best. You've got 5 or 6 houses there.
There is 5.
5. So what you do is you go into one of these houses and the lease is pretty low and the overhead's pretty low that first year. Yes, the first year. And you don't have to move houses, but that second year, things go up a little bit. So you better start getting your systems in place and know what the heck you're doing and selling some wine. And that third year, they keep going up until that 5th year. It makes no sense to be there because you can get a better deal away from there. So am I close to that, Victor?
Yes. The only bittersweet moment, and of course, this going into this program, is that you build up a location, right? You build equity in location. So then sometimes if there was an option, I would have loved to stay there just for the taste room sales because we had built up already this recognition. But in the act of fairness and to give someone else an opportunity, you have to be able to jump ship and basically go. When we tried so hard to stay in Walla Walla, unfortunately, we could not find a fit building or there was just minimal locations available at that time. Luckily, the Port of Kennewick, Port of Kennewick was starting to build the Columbia Gardens Artisan Center and Artisan Village. And that's when this opportunity came up to relocate the Palencia Wine Company headquarters to Kennewick with all the winemaking and then also bring Monarca Winery with us. Now, I didn't touch on this earlier, but when I launched Palencia, I also launched Monarca side by side. So we had 2 brands right off the bat. And as you can imagine, I remember telling my employees this, because this is something that, you don't share publicly. I share it now. I wanted my winery, from the outsider looking in, to appear like a large wine company.
Yeah.
Because
Palencia Wine Company. Yeah.
Because when you do that, you have better recognition from distributors. You have better recognition from sometimes even wine writers. I mean, you name it, the works. Versus when you're just a boutique. When you're a boutique winery, it's hard to get attention in the wine world. It's. I mean, any consumer will tell you. Any entrepreneur, winemaker will tell you. I mean, to get a sale, to get into a store shelf, to try to get into a wine list. So when we started Palencia Wine Company, we had Palencia Wine Company, Monarca Winery, and actually a couple other different divisions as well. So we were making a tremendous amount of wine in such a small little location, about 15 SKUs from the get-go. So you can imagine that was a lot of wine pumping out of that little location.
Aggressive.
Yeah.
That's pretty aggressive.
Yeah. It was crazy at the time, but my method to my madness was Palencia wines were always going to be very limited. Very vineyard designate style wines, very limited to the vineyard production. Monarca wines, on the other hand, were more regionally driven, so multiple vineyards, multiple blends, and more affordable pricing. So they're wines that were more readily available, accessible. And what this did is it took all the pressure away from Palencia about having to sell and having to produce and having to release. So Palencia basically got a very smooth ride into the wine business. Monarca was a workhorse early on, getting out to the market, really driving force. And then Palencia kind of just slowly started kind of taking over with the quality and the exclusivity as well.
Will not be tasting through. Is it Monarca?
Monarca. So
Monarca.
if you read it in English, it'll read like Monarcha, but it's Monarca.
Monarca. Yeah, well, Hispanic background, so there you go.
Mm-hmm.
And let's honor that too. Will not be tasting of the tonight. Oh, there's a beautiful label.
Just a gorgeous. This is the actual Malbec, and with the Monarca wines, every label or every wine has a different color. And I did that instinctively because Monarca wines both showcase the diversity in Washington State because our ability to grow amazing white wines and red wines, but also the diversity in varietals. We can grow a lot of different varieties. And so for our consumers, when they found, for example, they know they like the Monarca Malbec, they'll know that it's the purple label on the shelf from the stores or wherever they find it, where the Riesling was a teal blue and the Cabernet was an orange color. So like our consumers are like, oh yeah, I like the purple one, or I like the red one. And sometimes it was a collector, so they had all the butterflies. So anyway, it's been a really fun brand to market.
So this is not a business podcast, but I've got to touch on that because there's a couple of things. First of all, you're thinking about the branding and the consumer and the low friction, right, to get them to purchase, which many businesses don't understand that low friction thing. Make it as easy as possible, which we're doing with the color-coded labels. Number two, where did you come up with the idea? Well, actually, I'm going to ask that question after we open this one because we have in our glass. This is the 2024 Palencia Estate Rosélia. And I have to ask,
Rosélia, yes.
as I'm pouring this, again, beautiful color, I have to ask, where did you come up with that idea of Palencia Wine Company? Because your idea of the perception, it's all perceived value, right? To do that's not something that comes naturally at all to most people. Where did you learn that? Because that's really, really, really smart.
Oh, thank you. Well, in the sales world, it's all about the persona, right? It's presentation, first impressions. And first impressions sometimes are the most important and the last impression as well. So you have to be able to create an impact from the initial point of contact. I was really fortunate because I grew up in the wine world. Right off the bat, after graduating from college, I immediately became a winemaker manager for a neighboring winery, Willowcrest Winery in Prosser. I was there for about 3 years, and then transitioned into this other role with the Jones Family Winery, along with the Shaw Family Winery, and where we built a custom crush operation. Under that custom crush operation, we grew that to, under my direction, to about, we were the third largest wine operation in Washington State by the time, my 15-year run there, and producing well over 24, close to 25,000 tons a year.
Wow.
And for quick math, that's a little over 4 million gallons. So,
Yeah.
What that role gave me the ability to do is to work with a tremendous amount of wine brands all over the U.S. and internationally as well. And what I learned when I saw this and seeing how wine was presented by various companies and various producers is how sometimes these, tremendously large wineries were doing such a poor, basically were seen minuscule in the market, where you had small producers that had this mega footprint in the market, and it was all based on the marketing and presentation, packaging, the story. So I learned very quickly how that can create a large impact on your branding. Now, don't get me wrong, the wine quality is number one. You have to have a good product to start with, but it's the execution, how you execute your story, how you present yourself, and how you basically portray that company image that can lead into successful leads and sales and channels and be able to sell your product. So this leads me into Rosélia. Rosélia, as I mentioned, is the image of my father is on the label. It only makes sense to pay tribute to my mother. I've always dedicated our rosés that we produce in my entire years of producing to my mother anyway. And so it was a natural fit. Her name is Rosélia. That's her name. So rosé is in her name. And
yes,
and this
it is.
Tribute to her and the loving care that she provides for us growing up and continues to provide. This rosé is made with a lot of love, with that warm feeling that my mother gives me. This wine is made to enjoy. And so I think of those grilling moments with family and friends. It's a very fun, approachable, easy drinking, basically rosé. This is a field blended rosé, meaning the grapes were harvested. So it's 60% Mourvedre, 40% Grenache. So it's clonal Mourvedre, clonal Grenache, field blended together, produced this amazing complexity and fun style of wine.
Very fruity. This could be a trouble wine.
This could be a trouble wine too. Shelley looks
You need
at
a
me.
bad taste.
It's like, no, Shelley, no. The beauty of that. Well, let me just ask. There are upsides and downsides for field blending. When you're harvesting the grapes, they all go in. You've got 60% Mourvedre, 40% Grenache going into the hopper, right? And that's how it gets crushed. There are upsides and downsides to that. What are they?
The upsides is when it's done right, you get pretty integrated complexities that you wouldn't get after the fact. So this meaning you're allowing the grapes to basically mold together, the chemistries to mold together early on before the wine formation, before fermentation, before any adjustments, anything else. One of the biggest cons, though, is managing the chemistries, because you're dealing with two different varietals, two different maturity rates, physiological stages of the grapes. Now, for us, I will admit, this is the first time in my entire career that I've field blended for me. I've never field blended, because as a winemaker, I want complete control. The only reason I field blended with this vineyard is because I grew it, I managed it, I watered it, I tended to these vines. I knew exactly where these vines were sitting. And so I felt that confident about field blending. Otherwise, I never would have done it. And trust me, that day before harvest, I was still out there chewing grapes in the vineyard, making sure that I was making the right call. Because once you pick it, you're stuck. And my wife laughed, and she's like, haven't you had enough grapes? Like, no, I need to walk a few more rows. Give me a second. So I'd grab a bunch of these, and I look like a little chipmunk with, 60% Grenache or Mourvedre on this end, Grenache. I'm trying to produce the blend in my palate,
So that answers another question. Why 60-40? Because it's easy to put 6 grapes in your mouth and 4 grapes in your mouth than it is to try to figure out 5.8 and 4.2.
It is. No, because you got to remember, these are grapes you're dealing with. So the reason I went with the 60-40 both was working with the strength and weaknesses of the vineyard. And you'll hear this a lot from me. When I produce wine, I want my wines to be a reflection of that vineyard. And that reflection can be either positive or negative. Naturally, I'm going to shoot for the positive reflection. The particular site that we're in is a very hot site. But within that vineyard, there's a really sandy corner that I can really control the vigor and control the water that these vines get. So I was able to kind of pinpoint the areas where maybe they weren't going to be the strongest red wine tier anyway. So it was a perfect candidate for rosé. There's no sense forcing these grapes to try to be something they're not going to be. Rather than I'm going to work with their strengths and allow them to mold into something beautiful like this rosé in front of you.
That's fantastic. All of the 4 wines we've had so far, not one has gone over 13%. They're all sitting right there.
Yeah.
At 13%. However, we got some reds coming up. My guess they're 13%. And when we get back, we're going to break open one of Phil and Shelley's favorites, Carménère.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back to Wine Time Friday, episode 258. Can you believe we've done this? 258.
The 258th episode.
Yep.
Without missing a week.
That's true. Friday, March 28th. 11 months is gone almost.
There's a wine bill. That's on Victor's side. We have Victor Palencia with Palencia Wine Company and Monarca. By the way, the Rosélia that we just had, it does have rosé in your mom's name with the accent over the E and everything. This is perfect. I love that. That's fantastic. We just opened a 2022 El Viñador Carménère from Palencia Wine Company. And is this 100%, Victor?
100%. I want to argue even 110% with all the effort we put into it.
So let's dive into a little bit more of the story of Palencia and you as we sip this amazing Carménère.
Well, thank you for that. Great to be back. So with the wine in front of you, as I mentioned earlier, there's an image of my father there holding a shovel. And the shovel has been very symbolic for us as a wine brand, as a company. We consider the shovel the key to the land. Really, it's been the key to the land. That tilling of the soil, that there's a magical moment there where you celebrate the fruits of your labor, and that's what wine is about. I wanted to kind of share a little bit more into our upbringing as that agricultural ground that we grew up in started turning to wine grapes. So my father, naturally being a fieldman and laborer, became an expert in wine grapes because he was part of that early wave of generation of that assisted in the establishment, planting, and maintenance of some of these early vineyard sites, and basically the foundation of the wine industry we have today. In those days, there was a lot of reds going in. I remember Syrah, Washington in those days was recognized as, apple capital or, an apple state. And I mean, I'm sure you guys remember the variety Red Delicious. the apple red delicious, which was really popular in those. That used to be like the Honey Crisp, or in those days, Red Delicious was like the key apple. Well, when the wine industry started booming in the late 90s, Syrah started to be known as the new Red Delicious of Washington, which I thought was kind of cute. And I remember these articles, and as a kid, I mean, I was only 17, 16 at the time, but I was so immersed into wine by that time that I was very conscious of what was going on. Well, during that boom, naturally, my father kind of basically became just vineyard eccentric. Everything that he did for his day job was vineyard. And naturally, wanting to follow my father's footsteps, I would follow him in there, and I became very vineyard centric. Everything we did was vineyard, from pruning to weeding to trellising, you name it. Where I think I really lucked out was not just having grown up around vineyards, but my neighbor had a vineyard and winery right next to us.
Oh,
so
and was that a boutique or was that?
Yeah, it was Willowcrest Winery at the time. And I had a brother who was already working for him. I decided to jump ship and started working for them in the summer. And we just kind of hit it off. The owner at the time, I don't know if he just picked up on my good work ethic or just my interest in wine, and said, "Hey, would you come and help me inside the winery?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'll get out of this heat. Bring it on." And
that's a great point, because in there it's a nice, cool 55 degrees.
Oh, yeah. I was
right?
in heaven. I was like, it was beautiful. Going from that 90, 100 degree weather to, now you're at 60 average. I have to wear a sweater in the summer. But it was amazing, because for me, even though I was doing a lot of groundwork, cleaning and labeling and washing, 90% of winemaking is sanitation. So I learned to clean at a very young age. I loved it because I knew that I was part of this product that we're making. And my biggest turning point for me was when we would go to label a product or label a bottle, it had an identity, like that transition. When that bottle of blank wine that was aging, that we had nurtured and watched for the entire life, you put a label on it, all of a sudden it has an image, it's got a life of it. And which is really impactful for me, because again, I was about 16 at the time, because now I'm like, wow, this wine is ready to go to market. Someone's going to enjoy this and drink this. Not me, because I'm 16. Remember, I was 16. But by the time I was senior in high school, I was basically helping, at that time, basically managing the cellar operations and helping with the winemaking, to the point where I was fortunate enough that I had realized by that age, the ripe age of 18, that I knew I wanted to be in the wine business. And to be a winemaker was kind of a, shooting for the stars. So I was being realistic, saying, well, as long as I can be in the wine business.
Yeah, well,
I didn't quite understand what that
meant.
Shelley and I are in the wine business in a very, 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 very special way. We're the wine industry, is what I should say. And I'll tell you, as thin a slice as that is, it feels really good, because it's the passion behind it. We really enjoy this, and hearing these stories, it feeds my soul. It's the best part of this podcast,
Thank you, Phil.
But people I don't think understand is Eastern Washington, Wenatchee, Chelan, Yakima were very much apple orchards everywhere.
Yes.
And I think they're still growing some apples there. We go over there, but they're a completely different model. They're straight up trees, not big old canopies. And it's really interesting to see how that's changed. But once the wine started calling and people thought, wow, this is actually great terroir to make really good wines, they all came and started ripping out the orchards, which makes me sad to a point. Mm-hmm. But as long as this is coming out of it, I'm okay. Because we love apple, but this stuff, man, this is good. This is fantastic. And Carménère, there are Washington wineries making Carménère, and I would put this up against any of them. It is so good.
Contos makes they did before.
Contos does, Eternal does. Oh no, it's Cap Franc. I was going to say Elson started making wine, but there are wineries that are making a Carmenere. I have asked this question. Do you make wines out of every Bordeaux varietal there?
We cover quite a bit of them. So obviously Carmenere is one of them. We have Petit Verdot, Cab, Merlot, and we are starting to release Cap Franc starting this year. So we cover
don't you have a Malbec that goes in the Monarca?
Yes, we do have a Monarca Malbec, and we also have El Viñador. So with El Viñador, especially this Carmenere in front of you, once so going back to I want to go back to my story real quick. So that all that effort when you realize all the effort it takes to grow up in the wine grapes and tend to the vineyards, and there's a tremendous amount of effort that goes into the wine grapes. What I wanted to do with our winemaking style was really capture or encapsulate that not only just the terroir, but the love and care that terroir has received and those grapes within the terroir. So El Viñador means or translates to the garden of the grapes. And so if you look at the label itself, it's the same label as the Palencia, but obviously black in comparison to the Albariño. And so El Viñador is basically our reserve tier. Again,
and this
having I didn't want to be just another winery that would call it a reserve, Palencia Reserve. I wanted to have my own designation for a reserve tier. So our designation for reserve tier is El Viñador. So if the wine is El Viñador tier, it means that we consider it the best that we were able to produce from that vintage. So they're vineyard specific, 100%. They're never blended, and they're 100% French oak, and they're aged for a minimum of 24 months on French oak.
Yeah, this is the 22 that I think was just released, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking. All intents and purposes, they've been in the barrel for 2 years, like you said. But we're looking at 3 years because of the calendar. So
with the bottle age.
Right. Yep. Interesting. The reason I asked about those other varietals, I am waiting for a Washington winery to create a Bordeaux blend red wine that has 6 Bordeaux varietals, including our favorite little baby Carmenere here.
I've never been a big fan of blends myself because again my style is more vineyard designate and then really flagship vineyards. I will say the only exclusive one that we do blend is our GSM. But the difference with that blend is it doesn't change. It's always 60% Grenache, 30% Mourvedre, 10% Syrah. So the blend composition never changes. And that is on purpose because, again, I want the vineyard to show through because blends become really personalized. It's an ability. You have an amazing ability as a winemaker to really produce a blend in consistent product year with blending. It's a challenge to produce a consistent product without blending because now you're working with one component, one shot to get it right. Versus blending, you can add stuff, delete stuff, So I've just been a bigger fan of just letting the wine speak for themselves and letting the vineyard speak for themselves. I blend for other wineries. I do consult for other wineries and we do blends. I have fun doing it, but for Palencia, I want them to be vineyard. I want the vineyard to show.
Well, speaking of, we have another 100% varietal, the 2022 El Viñador Cabernet Sauvignon, which I'm guessing is also 100% given the. There we go.
We're back.
There we go. Given the fact that it's the El Viñador brand. well, sub-brand, I guess.
When you
Yes,
went off to college,
what was that,
did you
Shelley?
major? When you went off to college, then what did you major in?
So it's enology and viticulture. So enology is the science of winemaking. Viticulture is science of grape growing.
And you took no business classes?
No, they didn't really. I wish it would have been more business oriented style classes. A lot of the stuff I learned on my own, and
Yes.
working with people much older than me, much wiser than me, and learning a lot from them, and then managing multiple businesses across the board. Ever since I was a kid, I always dreamed of being an entrepreneur. I just didn't know how to get there, but I knew I wanted to be. I wanted to be a business owner. I never, in the wildest dreams would I thought of that I would be a business owner in the wine industry, because now I have two loves, two passions, or two dreams fulfilled. One is to be an entrepreneur. The other one is to be in the wine business, or a winemaker in the wine business.
You've accomplished both.
What's that, Phil?
I said you have accomplished
I
both.
missed that. Sorry. What?
Yeah, you're an entrepreneur, and you were in the wine business. And
Thank you.
I'm not sure what's more difficult, because they're both, I don't want to say anything's too hard, but it is not easy. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of perseverance. And you have to have a target of where you want to hit, because if that thing's always moving, you're never going to hit it, right? And so
Right.
The fact that you're doing both is fantastic and very difficult. Very difficult.
Thank you,
Get a kick
Phil.
out of these people who have a lot of money that want to own a winery, and they just take a large fortune into a small fortune.
It's you brought up a really great subject. I think I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. Being a wine business owner, especially with a startup winery, is not always a sweet ride. I think it's easy to say that it was luck, but there was a lot of early planning, a lot of strategic management, a lot of sacrifices that needed to be made, and timely executions to be where we're at. But when I think back, you hit it perfectly, because it's so easy to look at the landscape, and as a wine business owner, or an entrepreneur, I'll generalize it as an entrepreneur, to start comparing yourself and almost in a way grading your performance to other places or other businesses. And it's a trap you shouldn't fall to, because like you nailed it. I think when you have a vision, your road may not always be the same as your neighbors or a competitive business. But if you have a plan, you have to stick to that plan and not be dismayed, because there was a lot of times where, like you said, we had multiple opportunities to have investors just jump in and dump a lot of money into my business model. And to be honest, I probably would have been okay. It would have made my life so much easier. I wouldn't have to stress finances. But I feel like
tough decision.
Well, I agree. But at the time, I felt like the brand and the winery would have lost its soul, because what made it special to me, what made it was this is a brand with heart, built with sweat, blood, sweat, and tears. It was built basically from scratch, and I felt like even if it never grew or exceeded to whatever expectation, the fact that it was existing for me was already a win. So, coming from a very humble background, I always had a heart full of gratitude, but never lost hope and never lost the ambition to continue and proceed. So.
And these investments that come in, they seem great. You're going to drop a million. They want to offer opinions. That's exactly right. And they're investing for their ROI. Now,
if I ask you, do you want to be successful? Do you want to have some good positive ROI for what you put in and the work you put in? Of course you do, right? But you want it your way. And when you get other people involved, when you get 4 more people, you're going to 8 more opinions. And, it's just a hard decision to make, because if you've got cash flow problems and challenges, sometimes that clouds your decision making, and down the road they end up regretting that. Of course, you may have saved your company, but who knows? That's why this is never easy. No,
I agree. But just like it would be investors, it's also important to really, filter or guard your inner circle, because sometimes you have influences that are just as bad as investors, if not more influential, that could disrail your vision. So it's very easy to get discouraged and say, "Why are you doing that? That's weird." Or like Albariño. When I started making Albariño, like, what is that? I can't even pronounce it.
Yeah.
Never heard of it. So
there's a real fine line between having people in your inner circle that are going to give it to you straight and objectively, and not be yes men, right?
But also,
but you need both, and you need to trust. Even though someone might give a very valid opinion, you may respectfully think and move away from that opinion. And you know what? It's your brand, it's your product, it's your baby, and you're going to take that win and loss, however it may come.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's where you have to be really thick-skinned to a certain extent.
Yeah.
When you're in business in general, but especially in the wine business, because you're at the mercy of opinion and markets. So wine is a very subjective product.
It sure is.
And you have to be willing to take the good and the bad. It's just the way it is. And so my goal when I make these wines is I have a very conscious sense of what the market is like, what people enjoy, but then I put myself in the consumer's eyes. Say, okay, would I drink this wine? Would I pay for this product? Would I, how would I drink this wine? How quickly, or would I sell it? So when I put myself in those consumers' eyes, it really gives me a full sense of awareness, I guess, of what the potential of my brand can be.
Do you ever? Oh, go ahead.
So I think you said your first vintage was 2010. When did you buy your first piece of property, and how did you find it?
Yeah, great question.
What was the process of looking for that?
Great question. So 2010 was my first vintage for Palencia, but this will be my 25th year professionally making wine now. But for winery, 2010 Red Mountain Cab and 2010 Merlot were our very first wines.
Nice.
As far as the property, that's a really good question, Shelley, and I'll try to answer it as compact as I can. Part of why we tapped in lightly about why I produced 60% whites, 40% reds early on, because it generated quicker cash flow, quicker returns.
Right.
So from an outsider looking in, my neighboring wineries at the incubator were trying to figure out what is he doing over there, because he's selling a ton of wine and he just started. It's like, well, I'm the only person
because they're really good whites.
Because you have some.
That's right, and you have some. They're short shelf turn. Yeah.
Well, like you nailed it. I was one of the only wineries at that time, or very minimal wineries in Walla Walla, that was making white wines. So you were in the red.
That's so cool.
So immediately it became a destination spot for people looking for a refreshment. Because the reds in Walla Walla are beautiful, but you need some whites in there and it makes a refreshing palate. So that was the reason for that. Now, as far as a business model, we went with the lease program because there was low overhead to be able to initiate an operation, to have a bonded facility, a winery complex. Now, the vineyard, it would have been my dream to buy a vineyard from the get-go, but buying real estate and establishing a vineyard or buying an existing vineyard is a tremendously cash-heavy endeavor.
Yes.
If I would have bought
Right
a
from the
vineyard,
beginning.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. If I would have bought a vineyard, I probably would have just owned a vineyard for like 10 years before I could launch a winery. So I
Right.
mean, so my thinking was like, okay, do I buy a vineyard and start there, or do I build a brand and then seek a vineyard? And so I went with the later, and decided to build a brand, build a winery, business, and then seek the vineyard. And that in itself gave me the opportunity to kind of really seek our strengths as a wine company and to see what we could benefit from as far as the style of vineyard in the region. Location wise, we were already living in Tri-Cities. We love the Red Mountain region, just produces tremendous, beautiful, bold reds.
It's amazing.
Out here. So when this opportunity came up, the previous owners had farmed this vineyard for about 10 years, and they were ready to call it quits. I think their dream was to eventually have a winery of their own, but I think they've decided that they were tired, we're done, and they wanted just to fully retire. So yeah, I agree. Yeah. So they were kind of on their exit, and I was like, "Bring it on! I'm ready." I love. I grew up around vineyards, and I was overseeing thousands of acres in my previous job. So a 7-acre property for me was walk in the park. At least I thought at the time.
Yeah, funny, 7 acres. Yeah. What were those whites that you started out with at the incubator? I know Albariño, but among others.
So Albariño was the second year that we did it, but the first release was a Pinot Noir Rosé, Chardonnay, a Pinot Grigio, and then we had a Riesling. And they were all
dry Riesling?
Off dry, so about 1.8% RS.
Okay.
But it was an Ancient Lakes Riesling, so high acidity, just really Alsatian style Riesling, very, very mineral driven. But here was a kicker. This is back in 2020. Well, it would have been 2012 would eventually. I would say 2012 was when we started selling product. These wines were under $15.
Yeah, I mean,
so like on the front page is like winemaker, $15.
Right, and you're talking stainless steel tanks on most of it, right? Maybe not the Chard necessarily, but maybe neutral oak, a little less expensive.
So under $15.
But you got this, yeah. I mean,
great bottle of
wine. And you're turning through. Not only, here's the thing: you're selling wine, and every one of those customers, they're coming back. If you're not selling wine in the incubator, you're seeing customers, and you're doing all of this work with very little return.
You know what our biggest complaint was, Phil? Our number one complaint from both consumers and other wineries was that we were not charging enough.
Wow.
Man, that's again another tough decision because it's moving, and there is something to be said about leaving money on the table. But you also, in this day and age,
it limits other people from raising their prices also.
In a sense, yeah. In this day and age where you hear about price gouging and all this, which I'm not a big fan of that. I think the market sets its rate. Case in point, right? It's got to be difficult when you're selling something for $14.49 a bottle, and people are.
It's not the internet.
$13.99 a bottle. Okay, $14.99 a bottle, and people are saying this tastes like a $30 bottle of wine. You need to be around $20. That's hard because you don't know when you're that young what that tipping point is before people stop buying, right?
Well, so that's what I wanted to believe, though. So remember, I did this strategically. Monarca was supposed to be the ambassador for distribution. Palencia is supposed to be limited, higher tier, $30, $40 a bottle. So the reason I built Monarca strategically for that reason, and it flourished. It did exactly what it needed to do. It became the workhorse for our wine company, and to get our name out there, to get immediate recognition, immediate brand awareness.
Sure.
And then it brought them back like butterflies for the Palencia wines. So again, I think, I don't want to consider price gouging by any means. Those wines were strategically made from specific sites. that allowed me to basically produce wines at a profitable rate at those prices. So, I think probably there was some, I'm sure, frustrated wineries here and there that we were selling at that price. But I'm like, hey, we're not stopping you. Like,
yeah, I mean, there's a line between good neighbors and business, and you're moving product. You're still making money, but you're getting cash flow up. You're getting a little egg in there to buy that vineyard. You've got the strategy and you've got the target, and that's what's super helpful. We have a lot of notes that we haven't even touched, but there's one that I feel super important, excited to touch.
What is it?
Well, yesterday was the start of Major League Baseball 2025. Now, Shelley is not a huge baseball fan. She's still on strike from about 1912 or whatever that was.
Baseball strike.
The baseball strike. What was it, 83 or what was it, 90? I don't remember.
It was in the 90s somewhere.
Anyway, yes, the Mariners started their season yesterday, and they have a new hitting coach. Do you know that?
No. If they had a new quarterback, I'd probably know
the Mariners
that.
don't have quarterbacks. It's
No,
baseball. So their new hitting coach is a guy named Edgar Martinez. Edgar.
Oh.
Am I right, Victor?
El doble.
That's right. You also have been working with one Edgar Martinez, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah.
I need to know that story.
Oh, sure. This is one of those beautiful moments where wine has the ability to bring good people together, and this is the magical appeal about wine is how how it can bring people together. So I met Edgar for the first time at a Seattle Children's Hospital fundraiser. Amarilla Winery was the wine sponsor. So we were the wine sponsor at the Museum of Flight. Edgar was the keynote speaker. We had an amazing conversation. That's when I first learned that he loved to drink wine, and loved Cabernet, for example, just big fan of Washington Cabernets. And so we kind of just lightly stayed in touch over the years. When the Hall of Fame induction came to light, we reconnected, and I invited him to basically collaborate on this amazing moment and encapsulate that excitement in a bottle of wine and allow it to age with the test of time. So we collaborated. He assisted in the blending and made this amazing blend, obviously Cabernet-based blend, and we called it. Let me show you the bottle here.
Edgar Martinez Hall of Fame Cabernet Sauvignon Magnum. You'll need two hands to pick that up, Victor. Look at that.
So you can picture Edgar on there. It's all silkscreen, gold-plated silkscreen. It is a 2016 Cabernet Sauvignon. Beautiful story in the back. Basically, it says, "I share this wonderful wine with you. It is crafted with love, appreciation for the support you have given me over the years. Aged in 100% French oak for 24 months and carefully blended to produce an age-worthy wine with fruit character. This wine was designated to celebrate baseball, our Washington wine region, and all of our families." Edgar Martinez. So it's a very limited bottling. We do have it available exclusively through the wineries, and highly encourage it for those baseball fanatics to seek out this wine. It's definitely a collector's item. We will not probably reproduce. So just a gorgeous. We waxed it for extra ageability and sealing.
Nice. Chris Cochran, are you paying attention? Big Mariner fan. By the way, Edgar is in the Hall of Fame as a DH.
That's interesting.
That nobody thought that would happen. And
are there any other DHs in the Hall of Fame?
I don't think so. Victor, are there any other DHs in the Hall of Fame?
No, I think he was the first one. So that's a very substantial achievement, and what an amazing honor for such a great human being. Edgar's
He's a great human being.
Kind-hearted, just a great person.
for all Mariner fans, everything will be etched in their mind from that Edgar hit against the Yankees, where Junior went all the way from first, all the way and scored, and that picture of him smiling. You know, it's the few great moments of being a Mariners fan. That's been great. Shelley, we're going to get on to the CDA Gourmet Wine Words of the Week.
Yes.
As I get ready to pour this special wine, which I'm not even going to say anything until we get there.
So the wine words of the week is barrel taste, which we love, the opportunity to have barrel taste. They refer to the practice of sampling wine directly from the aging barrel using a wine thief that allows winemakers and enthusiasts to assess the wine's development at different parts of the developing process and the impact of the oak.
So, in our glass, now this is not my idea. This was Victor's idea. Of course, I'm like, sounds good to me. In our glass is not what is on the label here. Not so much. It is a GSM. It is. Will this be your Casa Amarilla?
It is, Phil. So
Okay.
this is a barrel sample of the Casa Amarilla. You are correct. Yes.
Yellow house.
So
I do.
yeah, little house, right. So Casa Amarilla. So the reason we named this wine the Casa Amarilla is, as I mentioned, we grew up surrounded by wine grapes. Well, this is a tribute to the small yellow house that we grew up in, surrounded by those wine grapes. And the wine grapes that surround our home are Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre that are in this blend. So it's a tribute to that kind of the upbringing, you know, our family being well, you know, just good things blend well with love. And that's kind of what, when I think about my heritage and my upbringing, what I bring into wine is, I think that's the biggest one is family and those traditions that I grew up with and putting that love and passion into wine.
Is this a field blend or no?
No, this one is, this is blended in the winery. So they're picked individually at their peak of ripeness, fermented separately, aged separately, and then right before bottling, we'll blend them and then go back to barrel for another couple months to finish them off. And that's what we're tasting right now. So this wine will be part of our new upcoming release, but this is the first time it debuts. So you guys are the first ones to taste it outside of the cellar. So
I'm gonna say that Lisa was pretty jealous of this. As at least you got to hang with us. I'm gonna make another toast. #cheersing because this is a lot of fun. And Victor, thank you for this.
Thank you both.
Will this be the 22 then?
That is correct. So this will be a 22 Casa Amarilla, which is again is a GSM Grenache, 60% Grenache, 30% Syrah, 10% Mourvedre. So when I look at GSM, I was fortunate enough, as I mentioned, my neighbor Dave Minnick, Willowcrest Winery, was one of the early pioneers working with Rhone varieties. We grew Mourvedre, we grew Grenache, we grew Syrah, and naturally we made at that time a Chateauneuf de Pape style blend or inspired blend, which is a composition of Grenache, Counoise, Mourvedre, Roussanne, Marsanne, and Viognier. So
do they use all of those varietals on all Chateauneuf de Papes?
Oh, the Chateauneuf de Pape is 13 varieties. Total.
Oh, geez. Oh, wow.
So if you're not familiar with that blend, that region is, those wines are some of the most complex and
makes sense.
I call it, they're just fun wines because the evolution of those blends. For example, our Casa Amarilla, we've now been making this since 2012 was our first release. I've tasted verticals from 13 up till 20, basically, 2021, including this one. And the aging is amazing on these wines. It's almost, for me, it's broken that mindset that wines need to be really tannic or powerful to age. They don't necessarily. Acidity plays an equal role in aging as well as tannin. So if a wine, even if it doesn't have tannin, if it has a good hefty amount of natural acidity, that's going to help in that ability to hold fruit and hold its own basically in the life of wine. So what happens, for example, with our GSMs is as they age gracefully, those acids, those spicy notes that you're getting from the Madeira, and then the little bit hints of riper cherries, the Grenache, as they mellow down, you're going to get more of the creamier almond notes, mocha notes. So this wine just becomes more lush and creamy and elegant to the point where it's just like, oh, and the harmony that time provides is amazing. I think that's one of the most majestic appeals about wine is how time plays a vital role in the complexity and formation of its enjoyment.
I'm getting a little herbal in this. Are you getting any herbal? This is really deep. Now when did you take this out of the barrel and put it into this bottle? As of this taping, which is Monday the 24th.
Last week.
It was last week, and then you sent it.
Wednesday of last week, because I think it shipped to you on Friday. So, yeah, Wednesday of last week.
So this basically has been in the bottle for less than a week.
Yep. And are you getting that? I was gonna say, you get that texture and that lushness on the mid palate, just the way it coats the mid palate.
I mean,
that's what I love about these
smooth.
wines. Yes. And so this is the one exception I make with blends, because I said I'm a very firm about 100% varietal style winemaking, with the exception of this GSM. I think there's nuances with the Grenache, Mourvèdre, and Saavedra, and in that blend that allow it to really showcase its own components. And the mouthfeel is what I love about these wines. There's textures and layers and flavors. So you get hints of spices, like you mentioned, black pepper, fresh white pepper, and then you get it immersed with hints of fruit as well. So
this is, it's really good right now.
It is really good right now.
It is really good right now. And you would think, just out of the barrel into a bottle, it needs a little time to kind of nestle in with each other and mellow out a little bit. This is really good right now. I can't imagine what this will be.
Yeah.
In,
give it about 6 months in the bottle. It'll be.
Oh, yeah.
And so
go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, and so that's, again, all boils down to timing. So we bottle this just in time so that by the time fall hits, this wine's going to be like right where we want it. And then we'll begin to market it aggressively, get it out to consumers, and of course, beyond our wine club.
Not in this house.
How many cases do you have this one?
So the Casa Amarilla is probably our largest SKU for Palencia. We actually produce this both in the keg form for restaurant chains to have wine by the glass, and then we also make a pretty large amount in the bottle form. So in bottle, we will average between 500 to 600 cases a year, which is not a huge amount, but it's a pretty hefty amount for a small winery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in review, we've had 2 sparklers, an Albariño, an Estate Rosélia, all 13%. We've had an El Viñador Carménère and a Cabernet Sauvignon, 14.5. 14.5.
Not big.
Not
huge.
that big.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this on the label says 14.5. Have you actually, is that going to be what it's released at?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would imagine you don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on labels and not have it be accurate. So.
We monitor the alcohols pretty closely. Yeah.
And Shelley's right. We need to talk about some of these price points. The Albariño, 28 at the winery, that's almost gone. The sparkling Albariño, I believe, is on the way out. The Counoise don't even try. But the Rosélia, $28 at the winery. El Viñador Cabernet, $40 at the winery. The Cab Sauv, $35 at the winery. What will this retail for at your winery, Victor?
About $36 to $40. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Get a case of this if it's available. By the way, I believe the last 4 wines that we've tried, if not the 4 wines, are available here in North Idaho. And Victor, correct me if I'm wrong about that, because you can go to Pilgrim's Market, say, Sarah, I need to purchase some of these Palencia wines, and she'll bring them in. Am I right about this being available?
That is correct. Yes. Yeah. So
Beautiful.
any of the wines tasted today, with the exception of the sparklings, of course, are, if you have your favorite shop where you like to buy your wines, we have Northwest distribution all over. So if Pilgrims is your favorite spot to go, if you request our wines, they can bring them in. We can get them in there. So,
and Cynthia that from our as well. We have strong ties at Pilgrims because they're one of the sponsors of our podcast. So we like to kind of get people that direction first, if possible. Yeah, wherever your favorite wine shop or store is, bottle shop, whatever, they can get this stuff in. Get these wines. They're really good. Some wines we enjoy this week. Should I just do this real fast?
Go ahead.
Okay. We've had Reader's Merlot. We had the Anura Chardonnay, which, Shelley wasn't a big fan of that. The Great Oregon Wine Company Chardonnay, Stars Reach Chardonnay, J. Bookwalter, Foreshadow Cabernet Sauvignon. By the way, maybe one of my most favorite next to this lovely Cab Sauv. That Foreshadow Cabernet Sauvignon by J. Bookwalter was one of the better ones I've had in a long time. Yeah, a long time. And Eternal Wine Passion Cabernet Sauvignon. And we've talked about a lot of these wines today already. Things coming up. 14th of April, International Tannat Day. The 17th is Malbec World Day, or World Malbec Day, however you want to say it. May. Oregon Wine Month is in May. We've got some Oregon wineries lined up. We're going to start with Claire with Big Table Farm out in Oregon. They are fun. I think Claire's going to be a kick in the pants. I don't think she's going to be quite as fun as Victor, but she could push Victor. I don't know. On the 9th is World Moscato Day. The 17th of May, National Pinot Grigio Day. Victor, are you still making Pinot Gris?
We're not under this brand, but we have a couple other brands that we make it under. Yes.
Nice. 21st, World Chardonnay Day, and why not have another International Chardonnay Day on the 23rd from our friend Rick Backus. Don't know why, Rick, that you decided to do one 2 days after. A super special day comes up in May, the 24th, every year, the anniversary of the Judgment of Paris.
And the Queen's birthday.
Yeah, okay. Still, really? Okay. The 25th is National Wine Day. In our house, it's 365 days a year, except on leap year when it's 366 days. We also have Paige Comrie coming, Wine with Paige, sometime in April. What to expect next week? Wines for spring. By the way, the Albariño is already in the fridge. That would be a perfect wine for spring. And might I say, summer. If you're doing it spring and summer, just go ahead.
Rosé all day.
Rosé all day, and just do it all year, So we're going to do wines for spring next week. And a big thank you to today's sponsor, J. Bookwalter Wines and Naked Wines. Victor, I feel like this was a monumental episode, and I'm speaking for Shelley, but I think she agrees. We are so grateful that you took some time to spend with us for this episode and share your stories and your wines. And we implore our listeners, did I say that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. To go find these wines. And if you need to go and drive to the Tri-Cities, do it. Yeah, it's like 2.5 freaking hours. Just do it. And thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, depending on where you live. Thank you, Victor, so much for being here.
Thank you. Well, I will admit to you, Phil, this is the very first podcast I've agreed to do, and I'm grateful that you offered us this opportunity, and I'm very thankful that I agreed to do it. This has been a great time. So thank you.
Well, hopefully we eased you in gently.
You did great. Thank you. Yeah.
You bet. So, as I like to end these podcasts with a little bit of knowledge, Shelley, you got a lot of knowledge on this one. A whole bunch of knowledge. With a little bit of knowledge, wine becomes a lot less overwhelming. Thank you, Victor. Thank you for making unbelievable juice. And thank you to our listeners. Have a great weekend. We will see you next week as we ease into spring wines, or wines for spring.
Thank you for spending part of your day to wind down with Shelley and Phil. Remember, you can listen to any episode of the Wine Time Fridays podcast by visiting winetimefridays.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us on our Wine Time Fridays Facebook page, Instagram, or on Twitter, which is @VintageTweets, for daily conversation. Until next week, here's our toast to you, to health, wealth, abundance, gratitude, peace on earth, and of course, romance.